Welcome to Deal Talk. My name is Jeffrey Veit. As usual, we're going to talk about avoiding dealer tricks and buying smart so that you save big when you purchase a car, truck, motorcycle, boat, motorhome, anything big ticket, you know? This is the art of the deal. I guess we'll talk about EV news first. That seems to be, I get a lot of questions about EVs, electric vehicles, because they're so big in the news. Not much has changed, actually, from some of the other episodes that we've talked about it, but you see news suggesting EV sales are up. You see that a lot, but they're not. They're not up. They are definitely not up. All of the issues we've covered are still in effect, and they're limiting the number of gas vehicles built and sold, so that makes it look like the percentage is up, but the actual numbers are down. In fact, Barron's Financial News has a front story in the magazine that stating that electric vehicles are not the answer, they're the problem, and that Ford and Tesla and Chevrolet, General Motors, are trying to figure out what to do. It's like the last 200 years has said over and over with very small advances, batteries are the issue. They're always going to be the issue. You can't do anything about it. And it's, Elon Musk is not, I love the guy. I do. I think he's a great patriot, and I think he's a good person. And, having that kind of money, it's probably hard to be a really good person with that kind of money. Most of the ones that have that kind of money don't seem to be, but he seems like he is. And he said in a Joe Rogan podcast that distance isn't an issue now. That's not true. He has a 400-mile model. If you don't use any accessories, it'll, might go 400 miles in the top, chance, in his best day with absolutely nothing else running, you might be able to wheeze out at 400 miles. But, let's face it, who wants to drive till they're out of fuel, till they're out of electricity, first of all. And second of all, if you run anything like the air conditioner or the lights or the windshield wipers or the heater or air, anything at all in the vehicle, it uses electricity. There's not a separate source for that stuff, and that comes out of the battery too. And so they don't get that kind of mileage. It's much less. In fact, under normal use, I would have to say that probably 25% is knocked off a electric vehicle when you use it for regular driving. And that's not taking consideration that you're not going to wait till you're completely out of electricity to go get it charged. And when you go to get it charged, how long is that going to take? Elon Musk talked about having enough in a half an hour or an hour. Well, what he was talking about was if you had one of those magnificent high output chargers, which are very few, you'd be lucky to find one in the city. But if you had a high output charger and you only charged it up, to 70% or 60%, you might get that done in an hour. Because like he described, the electrons are looking for a place to park. It's like a big parking lot, the battery, and it's easy to find parking space when there's not much in the battery. But as the battery gets full, it's a little harder. And that's why the last 25% of battery charge takes so long. You can measure where you're going and cut the time with less charging, but, maybe it isn't a good idea. You spend the time one way or another. When you get back, if you wait, you charge it part of it, and then you get to your, wherever you're going. And then you still have to charge the vehicle at some point. So it's pay me now, pay me later, but you got to charge it at some point, right? And there's still a price issue. The rich use them for status symbols, they say now. As a matter of fact, a lot of luxury vehicles aren't selling because people are buying an electric vehicle because that means that you're cool and that because they don't even learn about them. You think the rich are more intelligent. No, that is not the facts, The country's filled with people educated beyond their ability to think. And in the case of the rich, very often they're just people that had good circumstances. They inherited the money or they're actors. Actors doesn't mean you're intelligent. It's quite the contrary. If you spend your career reading what you're going to say and having other people tell you what to do, obviously it's not going to be something that indicates that you're over-intellectual. I wouldn't think. There's a well-known, give you an example. Here's a well-known domestic vehicle. I'm looking at a list of them right here. The Chevy Blazer. A gas Chevy Blazer with the average equipment, let's say air conditioning and automatic and, decent trim package and stuff, sells for about $37,000. The exact same equipped electric vehicle, exact same stuff, same accessories, same trim levels, is $56,000. That's $19,000 plus tax, almost $20,000, as a matter of fact, plus tax. That's about $450 a month on a 60-month loan if you financed it. So the electric vehicle costs you $450 a month more than the gas vehicle. And then you got, like I said, extra sales tax on the $20,000 would be $1,500. But take, for instance, a difference in price, just a difference in price. $20,000, if you're driving a gas vehicle that gets 30 miles a gallon, which is almost all of them get that much now, right? For the average American driver, which drives 12,000 miles a year, that's enough money to buy all of your gas for 15 years. Yep, 15 years. And they talk about electrics being cheaper to drive. That's not true. See, that's my point. That's not true. And even and when they made those statements that it was cost less to drive, that's before they were charging for electric charging. Now you see that people, when you go to charge a vehicle at a charging center, it costs as much as gas. There's no real advantage in that cost, but when in the cost of the unit, you can buy all your fuel for 15 years. That's 3 vehicles. If you had each vehicle 5 years, that's 3 vehicles. And at the end of each of the terms of those vehicles, they're worth something and you trade them in. At the end of 4 or 5 years, an electric vehicle, I'd be willing to bet they're not going to have any kind of resale whatsoever. Just like your used phone doesn't have any resale value to speak of, because the batteries go bad. And there's still the EV fires, commonly in America. And they're so hard to put out that most fire companies, most fire stations, train on electrical fires, car fires, separately. Lithium, manganese, nickel, those batteries are dangerous at any size. I don't care what they are. I have a smartphone that I was throwing out, and I might have mentioned this before in a podcast, but I went to hit it with a hammer before disposing of it just to break it off so that someone couldn't get into it in case they found it in a junk pile or someone got into it. I don't know how they do that, but I just felt better. So I smacked it with a hammer. Not hard, just hit it with a hammer right in the dead center, and it exploded. I have the phone to prove it. It did. It exploded. When I hit it with a hammer, it blew up. It started burning like crazy. It smoked. It was like you couldn't put it out. And finally, it was like a flare blowing the sparks and fire out of it. And that went on for about a minute and a half. And finally, I took it with this clamper I have for picking up pieces of paper, and I clamped on it, and I put it in a bucket of water, and it was still sizzling in a bucket of water a half a minute later. And that's just the battery in a phone is tiny. Well, you imagine one that's in a car. Very often, the battery in an electric vehicle is the whole bottom of the car. In fact, in some cases, they replace the frame. The battery is the frame. So you can imagine that. That's why those fires are so bad. They're just dangerous at any size, and that phone proved it. It was shocking. I was shocked to see the battery do it. I had no idea it would act like that. I didn't realize that something that small would make such a big difference when you go to hit it. When it catches on fire. It was like a flare. It was just. It was a really aggressive. Ford, GM, and Tesla are backing off. They have questions unanswered, like where do you get the batteries? That's the biggest one. Most of the 90, I think it's 80% of all the lithium is processed in China. The same with the manganese and the nickel. It's mostly China, so we're going to be at the mercy of China again. How can we get the price down to a sensible level? That's another question I have. Well, they can't, because the batteries aren't going to get cheaper. To even find them is going to be hard. What about safety? What are they going to do something about that, about the fires? What do you do to stop a lithium battery from burning so hot? I don't know of anything you could do. 4,000 or 5,000 degrees is where they burn. And that's another thing. And just recently, I'll get more on it the next episode. There was a parking lot fire in London where one electric vehicle caught on fire and it burnt 40-some vehicles up. And one car gets on fire, burns all the rest. Some of those were gas cars, too, not electric. I'll get more on that story and bring that next time, but I just got somebody flashed me that in an email just yesterday. Smart companies like Toyota are backing off on EV and working on gas engines and hydrogen. The real key to cars' future. The key is hydrogen. That's the one that's going to do the most, because the problem is that hydrogen is getting into the vehicle. So what they're going to go to a canister exchange thing, just like your gas tank for your your cooker outside on your grill. You'll take a canister out and you'll shove a new one in the slot and close the lid, and then you'll have enough fuel to go whatever distance that is till you get another canister. But the key is, even if it was the same distances, you don't have the time to fill it up and stuff. It would just be take the canister out, put a canister in, that's it, and move on. And hydrogen being the most plentiful element in the universe, it's going to be a lot cheaper, except for the system of building the vehicle itself and putting it in a canister. The fuel itself is free. It's not like electric where it has to be charged by electricity from a coal plant. It's completely absurd what they're doing at this point. Electric is really proven that it's just not. There's a million things you could look at and say it's just not working like everybody hoped it. And it's okay that they tried, but let's be smart enough to back off, because we don't want to ruin our country's, economy completely. It's already 50% destroyed. We don't want to finish the rest of the way by pushing down on electric vehicles. They're dead. They're not going to work. It's been 200 years. It's time to say, stop. It's time to stop. In fact, the public is starting to catch on, and they're not. They're starting to shop vehicles, and they're looking, and only the people, because the first electric vehicles that were sold for the first year or so were the people who could afford it, that were nuts, would have bought an electric vehicle if they had to drive to Antarctic to get it. That's just that they're convinced that global warming and CO2 is caused by engines. They didn't read any science. They just listen to people like John Kerry and people like that really don't know shit from Shinola. They don't. And when you get to talk, listening to the actual scientists and start realizing that that's not it. I'm not saying that if everybody got rid of gas vehicles at a way that didn't destroy our economy, and we drove something else, it wouldn't help to some degree, but not enough that would be a measurable difference for a long time. It would take a long time before it was a measurable difference. But anyway, if you like the podcast, please take a couple of minutes and do a review on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, Google Play, wherever you get your podcast. I'd really appreciate it. If you've already done a review, thank you very much. I have a bunch of them on iTunes I looked at recently. I've been trying to talk with iTunes about getting my name of my podcast protected, because there's people trying to steal the name Deal Talk for other things, and they're supposed to take care of that, but they haven't yet. They keep saying they're going to, and then I haven't heard from them, so I've been trying to straighten that out to figure out what we can do about it. But there's a lot of reviews on there for my podcast. They're all 5 stars. Don't forget to tell your friends and relatives about the podcast. If you listen to the podcast and you think you got a friend or a neighbor that's buying a car, tell them about it. I mean, if they listen to it and save some money, and they will, and I don't care who you are, if you listen to the podcast, the parts about buying and the market and all that stuff, you will save some money, I'll guarantee you. The average person could save thousands. It could be a huge amount of money. You're going to be a hero if you do that. If you want to get some written material to carry with you when you're out shopping, like I say every week, get a copy of The Informed Buyer from Amazon Kindle or Barnes & Noble Nook. All good reviews on that, too. It'll give you the basics for quick reference when you're in the process of buying. You can quickly look at it and see if there can, some way it can, something you've forgotten or whatever. And best of all, that safety valve is what I'd call it. The Informed Buyer costs you $3. And that's 68 cents less than a venti of Pike at my local Starbucks. For a cup of coffee, you can be sure what you're getting into. How can you not do it? I've mentioned this before, but it comes up in my email a lot. A listener has already purchased a vehicle. I'm not sure why they start listening after they buy, but I guess it's to see if they stack up in their purchase and their buying skills, to see how they did. Some people think, well, that's not that hard. I know what I was doing. And then they find out, wait a minute, guess I didn't. They think they do, or they don't, or they didn't even think that there was other things you could do. But I hear about it because the ones that aren't very happy with their purchase results want to know more about what they did, what they might have done, what they can do for one reason or another, and ask me what they had done, that they could do differently next time, or they want to know. They want to know because they didn't. And then there's a lot of people listening beforehand, but some mention finding a better deal after their purchase. And the first thing I want to tell you this: when you buy something and then some other dealer calls you and you told him you've bought and he tells you a better deal, they'll always will tell you that. Dealer knows you've already purchased. It's kind of an approach to type approach. They'll make something up. They just want you to think that you should have bought it from them, and then next time maybe you'll buy it from them, or your neighbors will buy it from them, or you'll give a bad name to the other dealer. And don't pay any attention, dealers, when they do that stuff, right? Some mention finding a better deal. I tell them, ignore it, right? Sometimes it's not enough for their trade in. Now that might be. Maybe the interest rate is higher than it should be. That could happen too. If you don't shop interest rates, how would you know what a good rate was? They usually have one or two things in common with any others I hear from, and I've heard from it in the past. They were impulsive, or in many cases, pressed for time. That's when it usually happens. People get pushed for time. They're in a hurry. I got to go out and buy a car. I work every day. I haven't got time to do this. You know, they get in a hurry, and they don't stop to think. They're saying they don't have time to save money. I don't have the time to save money or get a good deal. I have to go out and pay the ridiculous price. Some felt they should have bought some other options. That happens too. They'll say, geez, I didn't buy the options I wanted, and they forgot things, or they got misled, or a lot of times they just forget, geez, I wanted to get this and I didn't get it in this car, because, again, it's because they're in a hurry when they go to buy. A lot of times they didn't do any due diligence. There's no plan to it. They just go in and buy. Yet all the people still made the deal. And now they have buyer's remorse. It makes you wonder, why would they make those mistakes? What caused them to miss the mark? And it turns out that in most cases, not every case, but I'd have to say in most cases, it's a time element. Yep, it's time. Convinced that they got to do it. Some are lazy. Some just didn't know what to do. Almost all the people I've spoken with just wanted to get it over with. Everybody wants to get it over with. It's not like buying a car is pleasant. If you think about it that way, though, it makes it go a lot better. If you think of it as a pleasant experience, and it's your job, it's like a game. It's your job to get it down as far as you possibly can, and it is. These people were in a hurry and tried to convince themselves that they'd done enough to prepare when they really hadn't. Well, I've looked at stuff. I've done enough. I've looked it all over. And you'll say, oh, yeah, you did? Oh, well, what exactly did you look at? And then they're like, well, I don't remember now, but, it's sort of like politics nowadays. You'll ask somebody, well, why do you hate Donald Trump? Oh, he lied. Oh, what exactly lie are you talking about? Well, I don't remember exactly what lie it is, but I know he lied. It's the same idea. Decided to buy a vehicle and they're in a hurry and they just don't want to, tell themselves that they didn't do enough shopping around. A lot of it, they're just hoping for good luck. And when it comes to buying stuff, I think you'd agree, I don't care what you're buying. Not much happens that's good on a purchase when you're counting on just good luck. If you have a couple of days to get a purchase done, it's great. That's the way to do it. That's the way I've talked about in the podcast. If you follow the program, you end up with the best deal in the market. But life doesn't always allow for a couple of days, right? Sometimes you must get things done quickly in one day from beginning to end, even quicker than that sometimes. How's that work? We all know how important the due diligence is. Due diligence is the key to a deal when it comes to deal talk. You got to know what you're talking about before people are going to listen. Your vehicle's wrecked or broke beyond feasible repair, and maybe your scheduled vacation is now. I had that happen to me one time. My car broke down the day before vacation. We were leaving on vacation. And we were driving, too, and it was a driving vacation here in the U.S., and it was, I remember that. It was a long time ago, and it was a bad thing, and that's when I was driving. I wasn't driving new cars, and I didn't really handle it right. I forget the whole story, but, I look back on it. I hadn't done the things I should have done, and I held up a vacation for 2 days of the vacation. And one simple method that a few people choose is a one-price dealer, right? Usually not the highest price, and never, ever the best price, ho-hum at best, but somewhere near the middle, between high and middle. That's where the one-price stores are. But on the other hand, if you still want to make some effort in a short time you have for a really great deal, that's what you might do. A day, you can get a certain amount done in a day without 2 days. So the first decision is, what kind of vehicle do you want to purchase? With what equipment? That's a decision you have to make fairly quickly if it's going to be in the same day, right? And you have to know the MSRP. And you don't want to find that out when you get to the dealership. You want to get online and see if you can get that figured out online. And then you can check quickly online to see what that is. And if you aren't sure what to buy, at least make a few choices. Like if you're trying to figure out, well, I don't know if to go to Camry or Accord. All right, let's try them both. It's difficult to be in a hurry and take the time needed to pick out the right vehicle. That's for sure. Electric vehicles might be on your mind, but listen to the episodes about electric versus gas. In my opinion and my experience, I think there is nothing good about electric vehicles at this point. Nothing. I can't give you one good point. The people could say, well, what about the atmosphere, right? The planet. It doesn't make any difference. That's the fact that they're coming out with. If you get the real scientists, the guys, the PhDs, they'll tell you that's not really having an effect, not measurable effect. Electric vehicles might be on your mind, but don't. If you must get it done quickly, it's best to choose according to brand reputation. That would be the first thing I would tell you. If you don't have time to really shop around and get to know what's right, go with brands. You know what the best brands are. I can tell you. If it's a car, it's Honda, Toyota, Mazda, Subaru. That's the best ones. Early on in the one day you have, email 3 dealers on each model that you're considering. So if you're considering a Honda and you're considering a Toyota, you're going to email 6 dealers. Next, call dealers about the same information over the phone. Don't mention the internet quotes. Don't tell them you're getting a quote by internet too. Just explain you're in a hurry and ask for an out the door so that you can discuss it with your family or your parents or whoever you're getting, whatever you want to tell them before coming in. Make sure in all the cases they only include rebates that everyone qualifies for. If there's a rebate in there, make sure it's one that I qualify for without any kind of special stuff, because I haven't done anything special. 3 dealers on each model, both internet and calling. You should easily end up with 4 quotes fairly quickly, within an hour, hour and a half. You should have 4 quotes. Be ready to call the dealership owner or the GM if needed. Assertive now, not aggressive, but you may have to. Yes, it takes a little effort and elbow grease sometimes because they want you to come in. They want you to come in so that they have control, but if you're assertive, you'll get what you need, especially if the owner's involved. If you call the owner of a dealership and tell him, I'm trying to get prices over the phone so I can talk to my family, and I can't get anybody to give me any figures over the phone without me coming in, I don't have time to do that. The owner will get it for you, but he'll tell them, really, those guys won't play that game. They won't. And neither will a GM usually, although GMs aren't as powerful in a call as the owner. When you talk to the owner, they'll find a way to come to get it handled. They will. You don't have to wait for your quotes to start doing other things either. So keep in mind, you don't have to sit for an hour and a half and do that, then start doing something else. While you're waiting for your quotes, you can get things done. Like you can go online and get your credit score. Then you can take your credit score, right, and figure out approximately where you're going to be on the credit scale. In the last couple of weeks, I explained the credit scores mean and what they mean in terms of what you'll be offered. I think that was about a month ago, about 6 weeks ago or so, 8 weeks ago. You may do some additional credit work, too, that should do, before you rush out and move on, you can call the banks. That's another thing. That's a very positive thing to call the banks and talk to them about tell them what your credit score is, and you have a good job, and you'd like to get an idea where they'd be on a new vehicle. How many months do they qualify for, and what kind of interest rate is it, and how much down payment you're going to require, and get that information, and they'll give it to you in most cases, the bank. You call 4 banks and check, see what you qualify for in terms of rate and stuff like that. Believe it or not, this is big because rates and terms can vary by a lot, and that can equal thousands of dollars, especially on used vehicles. You can have rate differences of 4 or 5% on a used vehicle, and rate differences of 1% or 1.5% on a new vehicle, and that's a big chunk of money when you're talking about $20,000 or $30,000. It's not peanuts. And all you've done so far, we're only taking that and the quotes and the banks and the credit scores and all that. You've got 2.5 hours, 3 hours in. Remember, you're taking the whole day. You got one day to buy a vehicle. So you start at 9 o'clock in the morning. Now it's noon. You've gotten all that done. If you're in a hurry, you obviously don't have a trade. If you had a trade that operated, you wouldn't be in a hurry because you could take the time it takes to buy a vehicle. If your trade is in the garage or whatever, you call some dealers and ask them to give you a price on your trade in the garage. You want to sell it if it's in a repair shop. They'll buy a vehicle that's in the repair shop in a lot of cases. If it's got, let's say it's got a bad transmission and let's say it's 5, 6 years old, they'll still buy the vehicle. And then you call the bank and get the payoff on your vehicle and find out what they're offering you. I'm going to tell you whether you're in a minus equity situation or not. You're not necessarily going to sell it, that used car dealer. Probably aren't, but it gives you where you stand on it, what it's worth on a wholesale basis. So when you go in to buy, when you finally sit down to talk with dealers, you'll know what you're talking about as far as the value of yours and what you owe. You might be $2,000 in the dumper. You might owe $2,000 more on your trade than it's worth, especially if it's broken. Well, then you're going to have to come up with that in cash, or you're going to have to borrow more against the vehicle than what it sells for. And that's not impossible, a couple thousand. Dealers can usually overcome that with the banks. There's things they can do. When you get up to where you're 3,000 or 4,000 over, then you're going to have to come up with some down payment usually. But at least you'll know where you stand. That's the important thing. You're moving along, trying to keep things going. And you do this, the offers you get from used car dealers, you get at least 3. And then you can look in the books and see what your trade's worth in the books and deduct the work, what the garage told you the work's going to be, or guess what a transmission is. Or call on the phone and ask them how much is the transmission. They'll give you a rough figure. And you deduct that from the figure they're going to give you, and then that tells you where you stand on the trade. You've got all the information. If you owe money on the trade, like I said, get the payoff. So you've got everything. You got a lot of things loaded up right now in this period of time. You're maybe 1 o'clock. If you started at 9 in the morning, you might be 1 o'clock. That's not bad. You're ready to go to dealers and talk price. You'll have to pretty much guess at the dealer's reputation and ethics if you're in a big hurry, right? You may not have time to call the Better Business Bureau and check the amenities, but if you can take time and just go to their website and see if they have loaner cars or if they have rentals available on the property and what their service hours are they open at nights or on Saturdays for service? If you work, that'd be important, right? So you could get that information to see if they're in the running, right? Then when you go to the dealership, the one thing you want to do first is you got to test drive the vehicle. You pick out the one that you want and you test drive the vehicle, and that's important. You've already got one picked out. That's where you got the MSRP, but you haven't driven it. So now you're going to drive the vehicle. Don't ever buy a vehicle without driving it, ever. I could tell you tons of horror stories by people, even on the podcast, that have contacted me where they've bought a vehicle and said, "Oh my God, I hate this vehicle," and then couldn't return it. It's used. There's tons of stories about that, so be sure and drive it. You got to know that if it's okay. Doesn't have to be a lengthy test drive, but you got to know that it feels good and it's got enough room. That's the key. Now, at this point, you're pretty safe to talk payments, at the same time, as long as when you get the monthly payment, you get the CPI, complete payment information, right? The months, the term, the interest rate every time they quote you a payment, or if you're talking price, you get an out-the-door figure. I mean, if you spend a half an hour, or let's say an hour and a half at each dealer, and they're 20 miles apart, you could do 4 dealers in 5 to 7 hours that you shopped at. So by this time, if you did that, by this time, you'd be at 6 o'clock in the evening. But by this time, there's still time to buy. You got to remember, it only takes a dealer an hour to get a vehicle ready for you. So you could buy a vehicle at 8 o'clock at night, and you could still take it that night if they can get, if you got clear-cut credit approval. I don't like to buy without having credit approval, legitimate credit approval, because otherwise they can have you sign a bailment agreement that says that if you don't get approved, you have to bring the car back. And what they'll do is they'll use that as a way to bump the interest rate, which is how they get paid. Remember the thing called reserve? So I always like to get approval before I get it, but you don't have to. You can put on there that there won't be any rate change, or you could just bring it back at that point if you had to, but you really don't have time. So you want to be pretty much locked in. And when you only have a day, that's just the cost of doing business. You're going to have to live with things like that if you're going to buy the vehicle. Now, if you got really good credit, you don't have to worry about approval. Like if I wanted to buy, I wouldn't worry about whether I was approved or not. So I could buy without hearing the approval, because I just call the bank. If they told me, well, it's got to be a higher rate, I'd call the bank. I'd say, I'll talk to them. They wouldn't do that. I mean, if you got good credit, you'll get what you're looking for, right? No matter what dealer or vehicle you decide on, call your insurance company and see how it affects your rates. You can do that. Insurance open 24 hours, most of them. You can call them and say, look, here's my policy number. I'm thinking about buying this and I own this. Is it going to change the rates at all? And they can tell you right off the bat. In most cases, that's not going to be the case. It's not. But a Jeep would change the rates. A pickup truck from a car will change the rates. A really small car will change the rates. Electric will change the rates. If you're dealing on a used vehicle, by this time you should have seen the Carfax by now. At that point in the sale, you're at the point where you're sitting down to talk. If there's no Carfax, the dealer says, I don't have a Carfax, don't buy it. I don't care what they tell you. Nope, no Carfax, no deal, because that's a lie. Every dealer gets the Carfax on their used car lot. And if they don't have one, someone's pulling your leg. The salesman knows that it's a bad Carfax or whatever. Because if it's been wrecked or something, it'll tell you on the Carfax. So you want to see the Carfax at that point. So make sure that any agreements made in your hurry, when you're in a hurry, they're written down and signed by the dealership. So if you buy a vehicle that's got a dent and they're going to fix it, make sure it's written down and signed by the manager, right? If they're going to let you take it to a technician later on and check it over, make sure that's on the buyer's order and signed. And most of them will do that too. If you say, look, I haven't got time to take it to a technician today, but if I take it and there's some major thing wrong with it, like the brakes are bad or something like that, I would expect you to fix it. And dealers will say, yeah, because they've checked all that stuff. And if it got through, they wouldn't like it anyway. So if there was something major wrong, they'd fix it. They'll agree to that stuff. You just got to get it in writing just to be on the safe side, right? You checked all the prices, on the used vehicle you're buying too. You've checked all the books. That's important. F&I. What about F&I? What about the fancy insurance office? First of all, in the morning when you were calling around to get buys and, to get quotes and you were talking to the banks and you were getting your credit score, if you're going to buy rust proofing, you look in the phone book, rust proofing, and you call and get prices. If you're going to buy paint sealant, you call and get prices. You can buy a can of paint sealant for $20 everywhere in the country, and you could do it yourself. So if it's whatever it's worth for you not to do it yourself, if you're willing to pay $100 or $150 for paint sealant, well, then when you go into the dealer to negotiate. Extended warranties are regulated by the factory, so if you're buying a new vehicle, the extended warranty price is the same everywhere in the country. So if it's a brand new vehicle and you're getting extended warranty, the price is the same here as in Florida as it is in California. Be no difference. And on a used vehicle, that could fluctuate a little bit, but usually not. Usually they're national companies, and the price is the same no matter where you go, and they don't let dealers mark them up because it's considered a type of insurance that's not able to be marked up separately. But you decide on all those options before you go in and know where you stand, and that way you can finance them in. Prepaid maintenance is another one you might want to finance in. If you're the type of person that does your service at the dealership, you're going to take it back for all the recommended service, put in prepaid maintenance. Prepaid maintenance is going to be whatever their prices are for maintenance, minus about 20%. And it's going to be the same. You don't have to worry about that being roast beefed. That's going to be what it is. It's usually posted right in the F&I office. And you want to finance that in. The nice thing about doing that ahead of time is you can finance it in. Other options you might buy, you can wait on. You don't have to buy them with the unit, smaller stuff. You don't have to, if you're in a hurry, you don't want to have to necessarily think about that kind of extra stuff. Your mind's not, it's clogged with a lot of stuff. A factory-sponsored warranty is the key thing you want. Remember that, though. That's important. If you're doing a lease, make sure that the annual miles are 12,000 miles a year at least, and that the lease is 36 months and no longer. Make sure that you're getting figures based on that. When they quote your figures, just like CPI, make sure it's written down every time they quote your figure, not just the first time, every time. Only takes them a minute to do that, so there's no reason for them not to. Make sure all your quotes are the same. On a lease, make sure they're all sign and drive. You can always decide to put money down if you want, but the easiest way to shop is sign and drive on a lease. That's the easiest way, where you just come in, pay your first payment, and leave. And that way you can really compare price the best. If you didn't get out-the-door quotes, don't let that happen. Be assertive. Go up the ladder to the dealer, a GM. If you don't have them in 1 or 2 hours, then make some phone calls. When you're trying to get your quotes in the morning, you call a dealer and you're trying to get figures. If they don't call you back with the numbers, if the guy says, okay, I'll get that and get back to you. If he doesn't back to you in an hour, call the dealer. Yep, I'm in a hurry. I told him that. I'm not getting that. And believe me, the dealer, those guys are generally, they don't monkey around. It's their store. Their reputation's on the line. They get it done. Banks can make it difficult. These are the things that what I'm talking about now are the things that can go wrong when you go to do this, when you're in a rush. Dealers don't want to give you a price. You got to be assertive, not aggressive, just assertive. I need this. I can call the dealer or the GM. Look, I need this. You guys don't want my business? Fine. Tell me. I can go someplace else. I need the figures so I can talk to my family. And they'll get them for you. If he says, well, you got a trade, I don't know what it is. Well, leave my trade out of it. Just give me the figures on the vehicle, and you can do the trade separately. That's what you should be doing anyway. Well, the banks don't want to give you rates. You move up the ladder just like everything else. You can call the branch manager or the VP of the bank, and you'll get the situation. And they'll say, we want your credit. Here's my credit score. If it's not true, and I have a job, if it's not true, well, then I'm not going to hold you to it. But I need to have some feel for it before I go into a dealership where I'm going to be with you guys. And then they'll give it to you. You'll get it. A lot of times, from your own work, a lot of times people in the first level don't want to give up the information because they don't want to get in a jam or something. So you go up the ladder and things get handled. F&I products can wait except for the ones we talked about, the big ones. The big ones you got to finance in, well, then you can't wait on those. But the rest you can. You don't have to worry about floor mats and gravel guards and pinstripes and things like that. You don't have to argue over that. If it's total bottom line, you just, it doesn't matter whether they're on there or not. It's going to buy the bottom line. If you haven't shopped rates, you can get in a jam. You got to shop rates. You have to do that. That's paramount. That doesn't mean you don't check the dealer's rates, because I've seen dealers where they're cheaper than the local banks because they got the factory help. Well, that might be the way to go. That's why you get all the information together. It only takes a few minutes. We're talking about now, you could be sitting down after getting all this stuff done in the evening buying a vehicle at a significantly less than what you would have ended up at, one price store. And when you're with a dealership face to face, don't tell them that you're in a hurry or it has to be done today. You don't have to tell them that. That won't help you. Anything in a hurry is good for the dealer, so don't tell them. You wait until you're done, until you've got your information, or don't get it, that you tell them that. You keep it as secret as possibly as long as you can. And if you're going to get it done in one day, at least do as much as you can in the available time that you have. Don't say I got one day and then just skip doing everything because it was one day. No, you got a whole day. That's enough. It'll be better if you had more, but you can get a lot done in that one day if you spend time doing it. Every step you take means money to you. They're all part of the price situation, right? If you only have one day to get it done, take the whole day. You can get a lot done in one day. If you don't do at least the basics and have to give up, go to a one price store. If you can't get the basics done, one price store, at least you're not getting hosed. It's not going to be a good deal. It's somewhere between the highest price and medium. It's never going to be less than the middle price. Nope. And the problem of those guys is they'll, because they're one price, they'll try to steal your trade. I don't like one price. In the optimum situation, you rent and borrow a vehicle for enough time to do what it takes to completely get it done, maybe 2 days instead of one. And that would be the best time. But if you can't, and you don't, it's just a question of not having that second day to be there to do it, even if you had a rental car, well, then you do it that one day and you do the stuff I talked about. You don't use an excuse to not do anything, You don't think, well, I'll just outsmart them. I'll make them an offer and see what they do. That's blind. You want to shoot blind? You'll never get a deal shooting blind. You won't. You'll think you did, but you won't. These guys do this for a living, believe me. You got no chance against them unless you outsmart them, and that's what you can do. You can do that. Even when in a hurry, have a plan and get the basics done. Get all the prices out the door. Get all the payments, CPI, complete payment information. On a used, always see the Carfax. If you don't see the Carfax, don't buy it, period. Always look at the books on a used vehicle. Always. Always call a used car dealer. Tell them the vehicle you're looking at and say you're selling it. I'm selling it, such whatever one you're looking at. They don't know. You're on the phone. Before you drive down there, can you give me an idea about what I'd be talking about selling if we decide to sell it? They'll give you an idea. Most of them, you might get one that says, nah, I don't want to do it without seeing it, but most of them will give you a price. So you have to make 4 or 5 phone calls. So what? You're trying to do it in a day, you got to do what you could do, right? And when you're face-to-face, always ask for a better deal. No matter what they tell you the first time, I don't care what they tell you. You tell them, no, I want a better deal. You can ask them, can you do any better? And they'll say, well, no, this is our price. Say, Look, I want a better deal. And if you tell them that, I'll guarantee you, if you don't ASK, you won't GET. If you ask for a better deal, I've never been to a dealership where they wouldn't give you a better deal except for a one-price store. And in that, if you have a trade, that's how they give a better deal, is by giving you a little more for the trade. Same comes out the same, still less bottom line, right? Well, that's Deal Talk for this episode. If you have a question or request or even a comment, please call or email me. Callers dial 407-801-4071. That's 407-801-4071. Or email dealtalkpodcast@gmail.com. That's dealtalkpodcast@gmail.com. Please don't forget to do a review and do yourself a favor by getting a copy of The Informed Buyer from Amazon or Nook. God, it's the best $3 you've ever spent. I'm telling you, $3. Think about it. How could you go wrong? Like I mentioned before, tell your friends and relatives. They'll save big. Everybody does. Everybody saves something with using the podcast, and they'll thank you for it. You'll get the credit. However I can help, you contact me and you'll hear from me. Everybody does. And remember, every payment you get should be CPI, complete payment information. Make sure they tell you the amount, the months, the rate, any required down payment to get to those terms. Every time they quote you a payment. Every time. And every price you get, if you're going to do your own financing and you're just getting a total price, should be all in. Every single cost required to buy the vehicle. The tax, the tag, the dealer fee, options, any accessories that go on it. Every single cost. They call that OTD. Stands for out the door.